Hey, what's going on, guys? It is Steve from Florida Computer Care. And what are we looking at here today? Well, we're looking at a reassembly in progress. This is, I'm doing a hard drive replacement on an iMac. And this is, I would say, on the side of delicate surgery. You got to take off a front bezel. You got to take off the panel, being careful not to break any very thin wire leads that connect the panel to the internal system boards, and then you got to manage a few screws to get the hard drive in and out. I've already removed the old hard drive, and I'm getting ready to put in the new hard drive, which will go somewhere right around here. So I can't hold the camera while I'm doing this, but you can kind of see where I'm going here. So I'm going to pause this video for a second while I screw in the hard drive. Okay, the hard drive is back in. It's kind of an interesting little setup. There's where's my camera? Okay, there's the hard drive. Okay, so there's two screws that are kind of like pegs that sit down into the feet here, and then there's a bracket here that's got two holes that you screw back in. And Apple is very gracious to make all of their screws look like this. Let me see if I can get a close-up of this. But these are like torque heads, and so I believe this is like a T7 or a T8 torque head. It's kind of a hex head. It's not your typical screwdriver blade. You can't really get to it good with a Phillips or a flathead. So I'm going to go ahead and screw this guy back in and reassemble the monitor, but the hard drive's back in now. Basically what I did here is I had one system that died due to a major power surge where the motherboard's dead on the computer, but the hard drive's still good, so I'm swapping hard drives. This hard drive came from a different iMac. I'm putting it in this iMac, and we're hoping to bring the whole thing back to life here in just a couple minutes. I also want to point out one more thing here, which I'm not sure how well it's going to look on camera. But the iMacs, and these are older iMacs, so they're using the old school hard drives, the SATA mechanical hard drives. But there's a kind of a 2-pin lead that also connected to the hard drive that I'm assuming is some type of sensor. And so that also has to be kind of carefully removed and replaced on the hard drives when you put them back in. The other connections at the end of the hard drive is just your normal SATA voltage and data connection, but this little lead here is kind of a 2-pin lead that I'm assuming is a sensor for the drive, and you got to make sure you put that back on. And there's also a little tiny pad that goes on top of that when that's done to prevent anything from scraping it when the main panel's reattached to the system. Alright, so there's one more little tiny connection here. This connects to the system board right up here, and I had to carefully remove this piece to get the panel to kind of give me enough room to set it down. So I'm going to reattach that and show you what that looks like when I get it on there. Okay, this little panel wire here has been reconnected. If you look behind the monitor, there's a bunch of wires that don't give you a lot of slack, and these wires connect to a lead on various system board components. And this lead here has got a little tiny flat plastic head that just literally will gently, you can pull it out and snap it back in. So that's the connection back to the system board. And this is what, I don't think this is power, but this is somehow how the display is communicating with the internal components. So I don't think this is a power to the display, but it could be, this could be the actual RGB signaling to it for all I know. There's a handful of these umbilical cords that connect to it, so I'm not exactly sure what this one does, but it's important not to break these things when you take off your panel, and you got to carefully remove them and carefully reattach them. Alright, so at this point the panel is now sitting back in place, and it's just kind of sitting in there with gravity. There's half a dozen or so screws I got to put back in here. And I will also point out that I used, basically this is a Home Depot part, but these are tile suction cups. They cost about $6-7 a piece. You need these to get the front panel off, which I'll show you at the end, but I also use this to gently lift this thing out of place as well, because the panel's got some significant weight to it, and it's got some very delicate wires behind it, so I wanted to very carefully pull it out. So it's now resting back in place. I'm actually going to clean the panel with some eyeglass lens cleaning stuff and a lint-free cloth, because I did get a few fingerprints on this part here. This part's usually covered in glass. So I'm going to clean this guy up, screw it back up, and then we'll put the front panel on. And then last but not least, we'll fire this puppy up and hopefully it comes to life. Alright, so what we're waiting for here is to see if the Mac will fire up. And I haven't screwed anything in yet. I haven't done anything because I've worked on enough computers to know that once you fire it up, if it doesn't work and you put it all the way back together, you got a million screws to unscrew. So let's see what the heck happens here. Alright, so what we're looking at here is the beautiful Mac desktop. The Mac did boot up to the hard drive. Great thing about Macs is you can pretty much take a hard drive from any Mac and smack it in just about any other Mac, and they will pretty much boot without any issues. So now that the computer has booted, I'm going to go ahead and screw in the panel and put on the front bezel, and then we will be done. This was honestly the hardest part on getting this Mac done, was getting these little tiny screws in here. These are these little Torx screws. It's not a standard screwdriver tip, and also on this particular model of Mac, the space I had to work with was so small that I couldn't use a normal tip. Like, I've got a bunch of screwdrivers where I can change the tips out on them, but those would not fit in here, so I actually had to buy another precision screwdriver that has replaceable tips, because I needed the long skinny tip to get down in here. So this is now really the hardest part of this whole process, is getting these screws in and out. So let me go ahead and finish putting these guys on, and then we'll put the front cover, the glass plate, back on it. Alright, so another challenge I'm dealing with right now is that right here where I'm pointing the screwdriver, this is a very strong magnet. There's a bunch of magnets in here that I think it's magnets pulling the screw away from me. There's a bunch of magnets in here that actually hold on the front glass panel that covers everything. That's the first thing you got to take off. So in order to get these screws in here and keep them stable, because the space is so small, and help me fight the pull of magnetism, I did a little ghetto hack and basically kind of putting some Scotch tape on the tip of the screwdriver to just kind of barely hold the screw in so I can get it in there and get it started, because the space is really tight in there. You don't want the screw to fall over somewhere and get lost inside the system. And on top of that, you got these big magnets trying to pull the screw away from you. So this was my creative Scotch tape solution here to tape the screws onto my little tip here and get them in. Alright, so the last thing you got to do when you're putting it back together, or if you're taking it apart, the first thing you got to do is you got to get off the glass bezel that covers everything. And it is magnetically attached to the iMac, and it went on real easy because the magnets just pulled it into place. And so now you've got this whole seamless glass bezel that covers the entire frame, and you can't see the screw holes. And it even it even has a little tiny pinhole in it where the built-in webcam will go. But that's one of the tricks, is using, and I use these kind of suction cups here. These are Home Depot tile suction cups. Rubber on the bottom, and you kind of just clamp these things down to get the suction to pull the magnets off. The magnets are actually surprisingly strong that are holding this thing on. So I would suggest you use the suction cups to get them off and not try other methods, because that glass is real glass and it's pretty brittle, pretty fragile. You probably don't want to break that. So the Mac has been fully reassembled. So you've just seen the process in reverse. You saw the thing opened, you saw me put in a hard drive, you saw me put the panel back on, screw on the panel, snap on the front glass bezel, and now it's done. To take it apart, you do it in reverse. You remove the glass panel with the suction cups, you take out all the screws that hold the panel in, you very carefully pull the panel out, making sure not to yank any of the wires behind that panel that connect to the system. Try to set that panel to the side gently, maybe get something to stabilize it. Do your surgery, swap out your hard drive, do whatever you got to do. Put the panel back in, screw the panel in, put the glass back on. Make sure everything fires up. I went ahead and fired it up before I even screwed in the panel, because if I had to get back in there, I didn't want to have to go through the process of screwing and unscrewing multiple times, because these screws were a challenge to work with. So we're all done and the Mac works. So I hope you liked this little video on how to work on an iMac. In this case here, I put in a new hard drive, or swapped the hard drive anyways. And that concludes this video. Hope you liked it. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Throw out a comment if you have a question. Check out the rest of my how-to videos. Peace out, everybody.